The thing is that I've been living in Switzerland for a while, and I was born in London, which means that I'm very on the clock, and there is still 1 minute missing, so let's at least wait for that minute, and also there are some colleagues that are coming up, so. So, good afternoon. Welcome back to this session that is about the pedagogic. This is a very nice session. As we've been seeing through this conference, this large project of ours, it moves around 3 big pillars. One about the history, the catalog, and when the instruments, what were they playing, etc. Another one about reconstruction instruments, like we were talking about this morning. And there is also another important part about pedagogy, which Donna opened. And this afternoon we are going to have really overview about it. When we first started the project, we thought that one of the uses of the historical fagottini were for kids, since they are small instruments, and that's also the use that the modern fagottini are used. So that's why we thought, well, why not using these small instruments also for pedagogic? We didn't see so many references in historical sources, but we still want to implement that and to try. So we have prepared a session this morning that I'm going to combine. This means that I'm going to have the questions after our two speakers finish, so they will come together and then all the questions. And we're going to talk about pedagogic, historical pedagogic, and modern pedagogic. And by modern pedagogic is mainly how we are trying to apply these things. So our first speaker, who is going to talk about the history of pedagogic, how were they teaching music in general from Middle Ages until probably now, and she's going to give us an overview, is Kelly Landerkin, who is currently the chairwoman of the Schola Cantorum Basiliensis. She has a lot of experience running the masters at the Schola, the pedagogical masters and all the organizations, and she has been studying chant. Is very much her time period of choice could be the high Middle Ages, and she's here ready to give us a perspective about the pedagogic uses of how were they using studying music in the past. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aria. So, thank you very much, Aurea. Dear friends, students and colleagues, I'm delighted to be here with you today, although virtually nothing I say has much specifically to do with bassoons. But from a more general perspective, I believe that the voices from past historical sources offer some commonalities on the pedagogy of music for our teaching today, and I hope that they inspire you just as much as they do me. What are our expectations on the teacher? And what role should the students play in their own education? Although often less explicit than we would like, the sources give us excellent indications of both good and bad teachers, as well as the desired qualities of the student. And these aspects of the learning situation can still be meaningful for us today. The pedagogy classes here at the Schola delve into many of these questions, and many of the ideas and concepts that I will offer here are thanks to the research and efforts of our students, for which I am eternally grateful. I would now like to highlight some ideas that we encounter in sources across the board that seem to present a pragmatic foundation for the art of teaching. First, contact time. When we read about teaching in earlier times, An overriding theme in most sources is the sheer amount of contact time between pupil and teacher, across the spectrum from the medieval cloister schools through institutions, as well as in the private setting of the teacher's home in the modern era. A peek into the classroom of a singing school in mid-17th century Rome is indulged us by Giovanni Pondempi. He describes for us the grueling order of the school day for aspiring professional cantors thus. The schools in Rome oblige them 1 hour every day to sing difficult and uncomfortable things, another hour in practicing trills, another in passaggi, another in letters, another in teaching and practicing singing under the supervision of the maestro, and all of these obligations take place in the morning hours. In the afternoon, they spend a half an hour in theory lessons, another half hour in contrapuntualmente, an hour in writing counterpoint, another in letters, and with the rest of the day they practiced harpsichord or composed psalms, motets, canzonets, or other kinds of cantilenas according to their own taste. And these were the regular tasks that the pupils did every day in the house. To my count, that's 8 hours of instruction, 5 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, in individual and group lessons with a teacher, followed by an undisclosed amount of practice time and visits to local churches to hear the cantori. The students are immersed in their craft for most of their waking hours. They learned to make music by being included in musical activities from the earliest age. This intensity of contact time was also described by Philipp David Kreuter in 1712 for his time as a student of Bach. He certainly gives me 6 hours of information that I especially need for composition and keyboards, also sometimes for other instruments. The rest of the time I use alone to practice and copy. Then he talks to me about the pieces, and I'm also free to look through his. Kreuter lived under Bach's roof during his studies, perhaps not our model for today, and assisted him with his teaching, as was common practice. The same is detailed by Johann Gottfried Müttel, who lived with the Bachs in 1750 and was not only his student, but also taught some of his lessons to other pupils in the last months before Bach's death. This type of learning environment encompasses all aspects of practical and theoretical musical training and also imparts the essentials of the art of teaching. But it was also a social and cultural immersion to the extent of even becoming part of the extended family, traveling together and living under the same roof. The standard for instrumental musical tuition in today's world is the individual lesson between one teacher and one student, with the opportunity for the teacher to offer direct and immediate instruction and feedback. But this is not only the most desired model for today. We bear witness to this in earlier times as well. For instance, through the court case against Pietro Ponzio, teacher of singing and counterpoint in Bergamo and Parma. In 1566, he was taken to trial for bad teaching. Imagine if that still happened today. But perhaps more importantly, for teaching without integrity. The allegations were manifold. He showed up to lessons late, didn't give individual instruction or let the students sing alone in class, and didn't correct them in their work. This was quite a sore point among the students. They protested their need to sing alone to be able to hear themselves and to be confident that they knew their parts. According to testimony at the trial by Claudio de Cortesis and Francesco Bordogna, he never had me sing except one time only, and one cannot learn in this manner. Ponzio dissented, arguing back, one could learn as much singing with the others as alone. But without the possibility to sing on their own, the pupils were timid and mistake-prone. They were not able to fulfill their intended purpose, to be able to perform confidently as professional musicians. When modern-day policymakers ask us to defend the necessity of individual contact time with students, let us remind them of Ponzio's trial and the uprising against him and the school due to poor and insufficient supervision. The trial proved his incompetence and moral depravity, a subject for another day, but he was still able to get another job directly after his sentencing. For more on this captivating event, I highly recommend Elam Rotem's YouTube video on early music sources. In written treatises, we often witness a systematic, structured, step-by-step approach. First, music theory, then singing, then one instrument or another, then composition, and all this thoroughly didactically laid out. Franz Josef Fröhlich, in the introduction to his Vollständige theoretisch-praktische Musikschule zum Gebrauch für Musikdirektoren, Lehrer und Liebhaber, reflects upon his intentions with his method thus. I believe to have offered many a teacher a service in handling all subjects step by step, but without intending to steal their thunder. In Mattesson's Kleine Generalbassschule, we find the following. One should lead people carefully, one step after the other, upwards from the dark valley, first to the bright plain, and finally into the hills and mountains. He gives the following roadmap specifically for the training of harpsichordists. First, we will get acquainted with the keyboard, and we shouldn't have to ask the keys every moment, is that you? Is that you? Second, all the notes, including their values, dots, pauses, and even the signatures and indications, are learned and understood in advance. Third, the order and alternation of the fingers is determined, and so on and so on and so on. It is not only Mattesson's contents that make his treatise valuable, but his didactical approach. The structure exhibited here in exquisite detail is the equivalent of a syllabus, with a clear eye toward the later professional function of the hopeful and ambitious student. This step-by-step approach is worth reading even today, and if followed copiously, must certainly bring the student forward on his path in an efficient and methodical manner. But such rigid methodology was not to every student's taste. Zacconi offers us the following story of an unsatisfied pupil in the class of Andrea Gabrieli. Among the many pupils of Signore Andrea Gabrieli, there was one who, after having made many counterpoints over a cantus firmus, grew bored. He asked the maestro to change it. The maestro looked at him with an unpleasant demeanor and said, "What do you want to change? Just wait, you know nothing." And the student was embarrassed, and he kept to the same task for about 2 more months. Every day he worked on it, and after the 2 months had passed, he again said to the maestro, "Please give me a new cantus firmus. I don't know what else to do here." "Oh, povero, you have not even begun." And suddenly, Gabriele took up the pen and immediately wrote 4 or 5 fugues, one more beautiful than the next, saying, "See if you have really done everything you can." And he kept the same cantus firmus for another month. But the student changed it himself. When he told the master this, Signore Andrea said, "You have learned nothing." And so it was. Instead of continuing with knowledge, while the other students progressed and surpassed him, he fell back, ignorant, and with the few things that he knew, he withdrew. This is the fate of the non-industrious student. It can be a hard graft, but hard work does pay off. As Mattesson confirms, it is hard to believe what an effect uninterrupted diligence and the constant continuation of the work can have. So, does all success depend solely on the industry of the student? Are we teachers really necessary at all? The experts are, in fact, divided. If we are to believe Peter Preleur, a teacher is actually not explicitly required. We are only mentioned 2 times in his whole treatise. In his section on the flute, the instructions of a good master, together with showing his manner of blowing into it, may save the learner much time and trouble in the acquiring of it. And for the singers, "For fear you should not sing exactly in tune, you ought to get the assistance of a person skilled in music, and let him sing or play with you till you remember so well as to do without him." In both instances, we teachers are not much more than nice-to-haves. In the first case, the teacher acts basically as a time saver for the pupil, which carries the implicit idea that the student could achieve the same results with more time and less instruction. And in the second case, he is of value in the moment of need, but summarily dismissed when the moment has passed. Fröhlich writes that he hopes to offer the student the independence to progress even without the help of tuition from a professional artist. This, of course, is meant to appeal to the amateur, the Liebhaber addressed in the title of his method, but also shares this pragmatic mindset of Priller. Roger North describes an infamous teacher, a certain Reverend Covell, as such. He was full of boast that he could teach anyone in a month, and in 6 months to play as well as himself, which might be true as to knowledge, but in practice is palpably impossible, for playing is a habit, which comes not, however a little helped, by teaching, but from long and continued use. Also here we play a fairly unnecessary role, albeit useful as a catalyst for learning. In contrast, Quantz admittedly defends the necessity of a good teacher. It is a great advantage for those who wish to devote themselves to music if they are taken on from the very beginning by a good teacher. Right from the beginning, one should take the best master he can get. You can progress more in 1 year with a good teacher than with a bad one in perhaps 10 years. His treatise does not open with the basic foundations of music, but dives right in with the higher expectations, in the assured assumption that the student has a real, live, excellent teacher to lay them down, and who would do so better than a book ever could. And Johann Friedrich Christmann, who based his instruction series for children on C.P.E. Bach's method, criticizes teachers who neglect their duties and expect their students to fend for themselves. Shame on the teacher who himself takes neither the time nor the energy to instruct the student on the foundations, and who recommends that he should learn them just on his own. This is how a general aversion and lack of diligence sets in on the part of the student, chagrin and displeasure on the part of the teacher. I could go on. But all in all, I think it is safe to say that the majority of theorists, experts, and students would rather have us than not. At least, I hope so. In our readings, what character and personality traits do we come across in the descriptions of teachers? A good temper, a mild and sober demeanor, maturity, and a sense of restraint are common ideals of the optimal pedagogue. The 11th century colloquies of Aelfric state that a good teacher is mild and that he will not flog his students without reason. I had to bring something medieval in here, right? My one moment. And Matteson gives the following advice when seeking a teacher. First, make sure that you choose as your teacher a modest, demure person who does not have any obvious and great vices. No conceited visionary. No one who loves the inappropriate grabbing of young women. No dirty swindler, no drunk or scoundrel. Roger North discusses the qualities of a good teacher in a similar vein. But masters are first to be had who can reasonably answer for what they undertake. First, get a teacher who understands and hath experience in teaching, which is a distinct art from playing, and few or scarce any young men have it. I might add other reasons, such as seducing young people and betraying them to ruin, which they are too apt to do. But of that I suppose parents are apt enough to take thought, for if not, their daughters are in much danger from such gamesters. But the ancienter men, who have families of their own, are safe and will be prudent. Their dullness and perhaps humours must be borne with. And Miss Mary Burwell, in her 17th century instruction book for the lute, doubles down. To that purpose, it is good to choose masters well-bred and that are famous. Gravity becomes the master, to be gentle in his words and severe in performing his duty. The respect of the master toward the scholar will cause respect from the scholar to the master. A master should be neither too old nor too young. The young one is foolish and hath little experience. The old one is peevish, distasteful, and knows not or slights the new manner of playing. And in a moment of serendipity, when I was sourcing Thurston Dart's 1958 foundational article on this book, in the Galpin Journal, I stumbled upon Jean Headland's seminal article, Ensemble Music for Small Bassoons, in the same volume, which, as you all know, is an inspiration for the topic of this symposium. Patience is an attribute that is discussed with both frequency and urgency in the sources. Quantz recommends finding a teacher who has the patience to show the pupil a thing over and over and to let him repeat it. And Christmann writes, a teacher may not notice upon entering the room whether his student is motivated to learn this time or not. The surest and best thing the teacher can do is to act as if he did not come to teach. Instead, he should sit at the instrument and play the pieces the student has already learned, as well as others, with taste and expression. Even this is of great utility to the pupil and can rouse him out of his inertia and drowsiness. A lot depends upon the interaction between teacher and student. The teacher gains quite a bit if his behavior is caring, friendly, and respectful, and if he does not explode at every mistake, but tries to correct with forbearance and patience. And again, Matteson. A teacher should, in music as well as in the other arts and sciences, possess a good portion of patience, and not fly off the handle if things do not immediately progress according to his wishes. A good student is often scared off by the impatience of the teacher. He who does not possess composure and moderation in his emotions should not have anything to do with instruction. This composure is a large part of the art of teaching, and not everyone's cup of tea. In my readings, I have often been surprised and touched at how explicitly conscious the teachers of bygone eras are of the emotional world of the pupil. There was not only the need for discipline and advancement, but also for comfort, happiness, playfulness, and, yes, joy in the classroom. In the educational system designed by Madame de Maintenon during the reign of Louis XIV, the teaching of children, in this case girls, must always involve play, joy, and imagination. And in the studio of Antonio Tonelli, famed teacher in Carpi in the later 18th century, the belief was propagated that without enjoyment, there could be no successful learning. Indeed, for very young students, the best approach is not so much teaching as playing around with music and sound. He even suggested that the musical training can begin quite informally by placing children even as young as 2 years old next to a spinet. Their natural curiosity will lead the hand to explore the keyboard, and their joy in the resulting sound will eventually become fertile ground for a more formal musical training. Christmann's first and second rules state that in the lesson, the child's temperament must be taken into consideration. Through common experience, it has been proven that children will take up any business with reluctance and complaint as soon as they notice they are being forced to do it. And on the contrary, do everything with delight and eagerness when they do not feel pressure. The teacher observes his students and waits for precisely the moment when he believes that his instruction will be accepted with pleasure. And in his seventh rule, Christmann promotes a surprisingly innovative and reflected approach to the teaching process. In teaching, it is better to observe how the children learn rather than how much they learn. This is actually a spectacular statement for the time, and one that we as teachers today can certainly identify with. There's a general feeling that the best players may not be the most productive teachers. According to Matteson, it is one thing to play well, but another to make good players. I know some masters who believe themselves to play with distinction, whom one can finally listen to for a quarter hour without yawning, But when they should teach someone, they do not know whether to start at the end or the beginning. They think it is enough if they only jot down a few lines, and without structure they give some fingerings. They play it once through, cross one leg over the other, and take some snuff, look at their watch or out the window, shake their head, stomp their feet, and walk away. But at the same time, the potential of the students can be hindered by their teacher's own technical and musical limitations. Matheson again. I know also others who have not regarded themselves highly at all, and yet they give good, healthy lessons. Yet, these can lead the subordinate only as far as they have come themselves, not more. And later, choosing inept masters spoils even the best students. Some mean well, but cannot offer more than the young, inexperienced doctors who in their practice send a couple hundred ill and infirm to the grave, while also getting paid handsomely for it. When it comes to the discussion of didactical skills, Matheson waxes poetical, asking the fundamental question in his chapter 5. What qualities must someone have who wants to teach this or that discipline? On this point, the authors remain silent. Why is that? Imagined abilities, arrogance, and self-cultivated mastery are the cause of it. Almost everyone who teaches is completely convinced that he possesses everything and more of what it needs. He is constantly taken with his glorious knowledge and thinks no more of what he lacks. He prefers to speak much of the culpability of the pupil, not of the duty of the teacher. Quantz also does not hold back what the bad teacher is lacking. Here is just an excerpt. He is no more than a simple instrumentalist, doesn't understand the technical basics, and only teaches by ear and through imitation, as if he were training a bird. He gives pieces that are too easy or too difficult, flatters the pupil, and overlooks all mistakes. And finally, he lacks patience and is unwilling to repeat the exercises when necessary. Roger North concurs. When they teach, it is merely by imitation, and they know not the true reason of the excellencies they have, nor can obviate the devious errors of scholars, nor so well judge of the beauty or deformity of habits, but will let them run on till past cure. Mary Burwell comments upon the inherent danger for students who imitate masters, saying, "Scholars are like apes or like wax. They take any impression by imitating their masters." These are descriptions that paint a picture of the teacher we would indeed like to stamp out, and again, character plays a leading role. After having explored the role of the teacher, let's turn for a brief minute to the student. What do we think we know? Serious students started early, by at least 6 or 7, for according to Quantz, younger pupils are more flexible in body and mind. As recorded by our sources, they practiced all day and profited from the integration and immersion into the personal and social context of their teachers. According to Tonelli, the parents should be involved in the learning process, bringing the teaching into the home. He himself was a proud father, describing the effect his 5-year-old daughter Maria had on the audience while she sang and accompanied herself on his lap, bringing everyone to tears through